I want to thank the Assistant Minister for Finance for the fantastic job that he and the Finance Minister are continuing to do in working to reverse the damage done by 6 years of Labor to Australia's financial situation. It has been a long process, Madam Deputy Speaker, and a difficult balancing act. While having a responsibility to the Australian people to support necessary services, we also have a responsibility to appropriately manage what is really the Australian people's money. It is disappointing that not all in this place have the same respect for taxpayers' money, including funds that come from my own electorate of Dunkley. We have introduced a number of budget repair measures, totalling over $41 billion. So my first question to the Minister is, can the Minister advise the Chamber on the progress of the government's budget repair measures through the Parliament? How much progress has the government made in passing unlegislated budget repair measures since the 2016 PFO? Now, Australians expect us to live within our means, and we have not done this in a long time. A lot of the past few years have been working towards getting the budget and the underlying cash deficit back on track. We're approaching the end of the financial year, and it is widely expected that the underlying cash deficit will have been lowered to $18.2 billion. This is a huge figure. However, this is expected to be the best budget outcome since the Howard government's last budget a decade ago. The size of government debt is not to be underestimated or dismissed. However, my constituents and I are delighted that progress is being made. My second question to the Minister is then, what is the estimated impact of measures that the government has implemented since the 2013 election? And can the Minister please speak to some of the key measures that have contributed to this figure? Madam Deputy Speaker, we cannot continue to borrow money to fund services that should be funded by the government as a matter of routine. That is why we are delivering a surplus in 2019-20, the first since we came to government in 2013, over a 6-year period that we've worked to undo 6 years of Labor, and the first surplus since the last year of the Howard government in 2007, just before Labor came into government and brought us to the difficult financial circumstances they left us in 2013. So compare that to those opposite. I was 5 years old when Labor last delivered a surplus in government. The Berlin Wall was still standing. It was a difficult situation at the time around the world, but even more difficult being led by Labor ever since, who have not delivered a surplus since that time. Now, it is our job to ensure that essential services like health and education can be funded through strong economic management and not by using borrowed money, where we can reduce our deficit to bring us back into a surplus and therefore reduce our debt. That means we are reducing our interest payments and we have more to spend on health and education. We can continue to borrow money. We cannot continue to borrow money forever. This is why it is crucial that we make sure that our spending is sustainable. This is exactly what the government's approach towards funding services have been, and we have now reached the point where we can no longer have to borrow to pay for routine government expenses, as Labor brought us to the situation of after the 2007 election, when you continue to put us into a continued deficit and therefore increasing debt and therefore increasing interest on our credit card payments. In contrast, we have responsible economic management, and unfortunately is not something that could be guaranteed if those opposite were again in government. The strong economic management of the Howard era was torn to shreds by the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd years in government. Had their spending not been reined in, Australia was at risk of losing our AAA credit rating by the major ratings agencies. And the Treasurer, the Assistant Minister, the Finance Minister and our government, led by the Prime Minister, have been responsible in terms of managing the economy to ensure that we have retained and continue to retain that AAA credit rating. Even now, those opposite would try to ride off the coalition government's successes since 2013, promising bigger, better tax cuts while pledging funding increases for every potential recipient that they can think of. Now, Minister, I am concerned that the only foreseeable way that Labor could do so would be to plunge us back into further debt, undoing all the hard work of the coalition and recklessly putting us back into a vulnerable position should we find ourselves facing the global difficulties of just over a decade ago. So considering what I've said, Minister, could the Minister please also tell us more about the budget repair measures presented by the Coalition and how these will get Australia back on track? Finally, can the Minister outline the government's fiscal strategy and how how the government is planning to achieve a sustainable budget position over the medium term.
Call the Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I do want to thank in particular the member for Dunkley for his very strong contribution to this debate. And he again hits on this important point about the importance of restraining government spending. And it's a very important contrast with those opposite. I want to talk to the member's question about some specific savings measures that have been passed through the parliament in recent times. But we also need to understand the alternative, because one way of improving the budget position is to make savings, Deputy Speaker, and that is the better way, that is the preferable way. Those opposite are all about tax increases, Deputy Speaker. They propose more than $200 billion of tax increases. The member for Rankin wanted to talk about older Australians in his contribution, but he and his colleagues are proposing to smash older Australians with a massive retiree tax that will devastate hundreds of thousands of older Australians, Deputy Speaker. They also want to smash the housing market by abolishing negative gearing for all except new homes in an environment where the housing markets around Australia are already under pressure. That is going to lead to tremendous problems, and it's going to hit the most important asset of the vast majority of Australian households, and that is their home. It is an appalling policy. And they also want to put up capital gains tax by 50% on everything, not just housing, not just investment property, Deputy Speaker. They want to put it up by 50% on everything. And they voted against tax relief for a business that has turnover of just $2 million, which is in fact a very, very small business, Deputy Speaker. Those opposite said, oh no, this is some sort of, big business and it is not entitled to any form of relief. And those are bad policies. They are in contrast with the priorities of this government and the priorities of the member for Dunkley, Deputy Speaker, because he knows that getting the budget back on track is about sensible budget repair. He knows that since my EFO, we've implemented and delivered some savings worth some $4.6 billion, Deputy Speaker, the hard work of actually passing budget repair. Since the budget, last year's budget, the 17-18 budget, Deputy Speaker, some $16 billion worth of budget repair measures, Deputy Speaker. And since the 2016 pre-election fiscal outlook, the value of budget repair measures implemented by this government, Deputy Speaker, is some $41 billion. $41 billion, Deputy Speaker, a massive improvement in the fiscal position of this nation. And that is why, Deputy Speaker, that in this financial year we turn the corner on net debt and we begin paying down that legacy of debt with some $30 billion of net debt reduction expected over the forward estimates, Deputy Speaker. And that is being driven by the strong results of this government. Now, Deputy Speaker, I do want to address, I note the member for Rankin, he's left us, but I do want to address a number of his comments in relation to the forecast. In relation to the forecast, Deputy Speaker, in relation to wages and other matters, here are some comments. Sol Eslake, Deputy Speaker, he says the economic growth forecasts in the budget are reasonable and the commodity price assumptions are conservative. Stephen Koukoulas, Deputy Speaker, not known as a raving fan of the government, he says it is important to note in this context that the budget is framed on a series of realistic and reasonably conservative economic forecasts for economic growth, wages and company profits. Very sensible contribution by Mr Koukoulas, Deputy Speaker. So this sort of assertion from those opposite is just wrong. And we note that in an environment where we are constraining government spending growth to just 1.9% in real terms, that means that public sector spending is under control, and that is the right thing for this nation, Deputy Speaker.